This is breaking news.
A Bloomberg survey showing a four-way tie for first place in Iowa between Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, and Ron Paul, all within the statistical margin of error. It is raising questions about whether Congressman Paul could see a new campaign surge in the coming weeks. And we are joined now by the Texas congressman and a 2012 presidential candidate, Ron Paul. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. So that's got to come as good news to you. Many people have considered you sort of an also-ran in this race, not your supporters, and certainly not, from the look of that poll, the good people of Iowa.
Well, we're very pleased, of course, not totally surprised, because our internal polls have been pretty favorable. But also, I have been talking about significant change in the economy and the foreign policy, and the good reception I'm getting on the campaign trail, especially with young people. I'm very pleased with the recognition that we actually are polling so well.
Where is the recognition by in particular, the mainstream media? We saw a debate the other night on foreign policy on which, that's a matter on which you've been very vocal. And yet, despite polls showing you creeping up in the polls and with the American voters, you get 89 seconds in that debate. 89.
I wished I knew the absolute answer to that, because I'm always asked that, but we'd have to ask the people who are managing the debates on why there was this exclusion. And I can postulate. Sometimes they don't want to hear what I have to say, because I do challenge the status quo of both parties, and our foreign policy, and the policy of the Federal Reserve, which serves a lot of powerful special interests. So maybe there's a concerted effort to make sure these views aren't circulated too widely.
I want to ask you about, you've sort of been a watchdog financially on Capitol Hill for a long time, complaining about overspending and revenue issues from the Fed on down. Right now, one of the lead stories today is this super committee and projections that it is headed perhaps for what the co-chair described as possible abject failure. You believe even if they achieve big success, it's going to be, quote, puny, the cuts that they make. And, it's like teaspoons in the ocean. Tell us.
Yeah, from my viewpoint, they're not really talking about cuts. My proposal is to cut $1 trillion of real cuts in the first year. But they're talking about cutting $1 trillion over 10 years, and they're only talking about cutting proposed increases from the baseline. So those aren't real cuts. But I think there's two things. One is they don't want to admit the country's bankrupt and there's not a strong necessity for us to do something. And the other thing is that they won't consider changing policy. So you can't tinker around the edges and get rid of waste and fraud in a program here or there. What you have to do is decide what the role of government ought to be. Should the government be the policeman of the world? And should our government be passing out welfare from cradle to grave? And I don't think we can afford it, and I don't think that's what it was designed for. But the country, basically a lot of people still, as well as the politicians here, they're in denial. They don't realize we're technically bankrupt. We're insolvent. We can't pay the bills. The only thing that keeps us going is this illusion that our dollars will last forever, and all we have to do is create new money, pay the bills, and bail out Europe and everybody else. But that's coming to an end, and that's what our financial crisis is telling us.
You know who's not bankrupt is former House Speaker and now Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. She and her husband worth tens of millions of dollars. And there was a 60 Minutes report this week, and it's catching fire in the mainstream media as well, on how members of Congress, including not just Nancy Pelosi, but they profiled John Boehner as well, the Republican leader, they're not subjected to the same insider trading regulations that the rest of the world is. And it's resulted, they pointed out, in Boehner investing in health insurance company shares before it was announced that the public option had been axed. And he made a bunch of money, and Pelosi and her husband doing the same thing with a Visa initial public offering when she had some inside information about how Visa was about to come out smelling like a rose. Should members of Congress be allowed to do this, sir?
Well, they shouldn't do it, obviously, because it's unethical. But I'm not positive that the members of Congress aren't under the laws. If you commit fraud and inside trading, I can't see where in the law it's written, except for congressmen. Maybe the enforcement is there's an exception in there, but it's wrong. And the real correction for this is having only ethical people in government rather than those that go with the whims of the lobbyists. But when you enrich yourself by a position in government, that's pretty bad. And obviously the people have a right to know about it, and they have a right to react to it. And if they're breaking the law, they should be punished.
Ron Paul, always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Megan.